So I think it's time to start. So welcome to How to Run a Consultancy Part 2. I'm Dan Menken. I'm based in Auckland. I'm a consultant coach and trainer focusing on getting the best out of consultancy leaders. I was previously the country director at one of the largest software testing consultancies in the world, Planet. And I've spent the last 6 months creating material to try to fill what I see as a very big gap in the consultancy leadership educational market. And that's around the lack of focused information on how to run consultancies. So my goal is to make it easier for the next generation of consultancy leaders to understand everything they have to do when they are, when they're put in a position of leadership in a consultancy. This is part 2 of a multi-part webinar series. So in part 1, we covered leadership. We looked at the roles and responsibilities of the executive, divisional, and local leadership, as well as financial and structural topics as well. If you didn't attend that one, that video is available on danminkin.com, my website. And in this webinar, we're going to focus on talent management. That's managing and leading those who make your organization tick, your employees. Just to let you know what comes up in the future, part 3, we'll look at client management, and that one will drop early next year. Part 4 on workforce management, and part 5 on business development. So if you find today's useful and enjoyable, please look out for parts 3, 4, and 5 on LinkedIn and on my website, danminkin.com. As we go through the presentation, if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat as we go, or you can just ask me them. I'll do my best to answer them either during the presentation or in the 20 minutes or so that will probably fill out the hour. And that brings me to, what are we covering? What are we covering? Yeah. Firstly, I'll present a talent management framework for consultancies. That's the high-level view and provides the basis for everything that follows. Then we look at each aspect of the framework, of which there are 6 in total. We have career, which focuses on the frameworks that allow individuals to progress. Then development, activities that help get the best out of people. Third, we have interaction, which concerns the relationship between consultant and consultancies. Fourth is reward, which speaks to how the company recognizes achievement and standing within the company. Adjustment is the 5th aspect, and that's about those processes and activities which are needed when things aren't going to plan, either with an individual or with groups. And finally, experience, which is about the day-to-day of being a consultant. So rather like previous webinar, there's a lot of information. It's being recorded. So afterwards, I'll send you the link and you can look at it again in your own time. And there'll be time for questions and answers at the end. And so let's begin. Let's start with that high-level framework that I talked about, and it's 6 aspects. And the goal for the talent management framework is to help you unlock all the benefits of the high capability individuals that you've got. Each aspect has its own elements that support this overall organizational goal. And here's a pictorial of that framework. So to begin with, I want to make some general comments. Firstly, the overall framework is designed to be comprehensive, to cover most, if not all, aspects of talent management within a consultancy, but it doesn't include some HR angles and any workforce management, including recruitment in particular. They've got another place in the overall consultancy framework that's under development. Second, you can use the framework in different ways. If you're setting up a talent management function, you can use it as a basis for documenting how that department functions as part of your overall operating model. And if you're reviewing your structure and your function, you can use it as a checklist to see that you've covered all angles. And if you're looking to improve something which is already existing, the framework's detailed elements allow you to make an assessment of the maturity of your organization. I'm going to take the first angle on the webinar, which means I'll present each aspect and element as if it's being set up from scratch. So that gives us a singular, consistent narrative through the presentation. And finally, in the spirit of continual improvement, I ask you to have a critical eye on the framework. Help me improve it. If you think there's an aspect or an element missing, do let me know. Firstly, we will go on to the first aspect, which is career. And the objective of career management is to allow consultants to progress their careers in ways which are relevant to both consultant and consultancy. The first element is the career path. And as people gain more experience in the career path, they can take on more responsibility and more challenging assignments. And that's the purpose of the career path, really. And consultancies of any scale will need one.
Thank you.
So this is an example of a 5-level career path. And you may see similarities with your own, and you could use this as a starting point if you're implementing something new. In any event, there's some considerations when you're implementing a career path. The first thing is that titles are important to people. They're obviously relevant to your market as well, and they help with internal and external positioning. You'll need a process too for exception management if you need to hire someone using a non-standard title. You also need to think about how many levels you've got, striving for something that balances manageability with opportunities for progression. You'll need quality role descriptions to support it, but also explicit criteria for advancement. And that will help with promotion, which we talk about next. It helps with transparency and consistency. And you should also consider the learning and development provided at each level. And I think your career path is your foundational element within talent management. Now, if you've got a career path, then it stands to reason that you'll need a promotion process to align with the career path. And a promotion process can be either push or pull. The key difference between the push and the pull is where the onus lies on for the advancement. If it's a push process, then it's employee-led, and that encourages the individual to take responsibility for their career. And if it's a pull process, it's management-led. And instead, the responsibility lies with the management team, the leadership team, to identify and encourage people to advance. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both. The choice of that strategy is partly dependent on the scale and the complexity of your organization. Broadly speaking, it's easier to have a pull process in smaller or more agile organizations, whereas push suits larger organizations, I think, with a more rigorous process, or where there's a greater likelihood of individuals being missed as well. Whether it's push or pull, your promotion process will need to be communicated to provide transparency and fairness to the consultancy base. So far, so straightforward, I think, but not everyone wants to go upwards in their career. In fact, this leads to what's known as the consultancy paradigm of the reluctant leader, who is someone who excels technically, doesn't want people leadership responsibility, but ends up in that position anyway. But a consultancy can offer something more. It can offer a career portfolio. So what do I mean by this? Consultancies provide significant variety in work, and they're suitable for implementing multi-dimensional models, sometimes called lattice models. These provide growth opportunities by allowing upwards, sideways, downwards change in the career. So that allows for individuals to build a portfolio of career through different types of work within the consultancy. Now, on screen is an example of a lattice model. It highlights 8 types of career opportunities that many consultancies can provide. So, for example, if you are learning focused, you want to expand your skills and knowledge, or if you're profile focused, you may want to become recognized either in your company or outside. And I think presenting a formalized model like this really helps both individual consultants and their career leaders gain a wider perspective on what their career could be. Next, let's look at who helps the consultant manage their careers. So initially, it's often the senior managers, such as the founders or the directors of the business, who help manage careers. And this is okay up to a scale, though at some point you need to consider appointing specialized career leaders. And there's 3 main options here. Firstly, suitable seniors, who have the suitable seniors within the organization, not necessarily the owners, who have the willingness and capability to manage people. That leaves those who don't want to manage people to focus on what they do well, their technical work. However, this can be somewhat piecemeal and risks having senior managers become overworked as their pods of people grow. You can choose dedicated full-time people managers. That's another option that provides focus, but of course has a cost associated with it. And finally, you can choose to appoint consultants who perform this role in addition to their delivery responsibilities. That's at face value cheaper to the organization, though there are considerable hidden costs with this. And having been through this process several times in my career, my advice is whichever route you go, plan it carefully. And when implementing, create a full change team around it. It's quite a complex exercise in bringing people together and expectation management. Now let's look at a strategic perspective and look at future proofing, and in particular, looking after your high performers and by so doing future proofing your talent. And there are three components to a consultancy future proofing strategy, in my opinion. Firstly is fast tracking, which gives those with potential the support to reach their goals more quickly. So an individual on a fast track process would have a defined goal, probably some structured salary and progression steps, as well as identified training for each step and where the support checkpoints come in as well. Next is succession planning, and that takes the organizational point of view to identify critical roles and puts in place plans to make sure that there are individuals who can step into those critical roles when they're needed in the future. And finally, a mechanism for identifying future leaders, which is usually done by identifying those who demonstrate key behaviors and attributes rather than those who simply excel at the delivery work. You might look for those who've developed a high internal profile or show a strategic commercial mindset, for example. Now, do not underestimate the complexity of all of these elements, these three types of future proofing. They require lots of organizational commitment and time, multiple years, in fact, to deliver the benefits fully. We'll move on to the second aspect, which is development. And the objective of this aspect is to put in place activities that will help get the highest performance from the consultant. So allowing them to meet personal goals, and in so doing, helping the consultancy achieve their organizational goals. So there should be a link between personal goals and organizational goals. The first element is learning and development. And you really should have a learning and development strategy and supporting program or framework. It's a key tool, I think, for ensuring talent readiness for your assignments, as well as a tool to attract talent in the first place and to mitigate attrition. And here are some considerations for your L&D strategy. Ensuring that employees have time for learning is key. You may want to publish your commitment to training. And according to the 2023 SPI report, the average number of training days per year per employee across the APAC region in consultancies was 9 days. Market leaders provided over 3 weeks. So that's something to baseline perhaps yourself against. You'll need flexible delivery methods for training to work around client commitments. Online training, micro bites, evening learning all have a place, I think, for example. You need to think about how you embed a learning culture or a culture learning from assignments more specifically. 90% of what consultants do is assignment-based. So how do you ensure that it's a learning experience as well as a delivery experience? And finally, you need to consider the bi-directional nature of consultancy learning. Individual learning should be aligned with overall organizational goals, capability goals of the organization, as well as individual interests. Now, consultancy is fundamentally about the great delivery of relevant expertise. So a consultancy without a learning strategy, I don't think remains relevant for very long. You'll need a way also of measuring people's skills for an array of reasons. It does help employees understand how their skills relate to their current role and what they need to do to improve for the next role. And we need to look at skills, I think, in a consultancy from 2 angles. That is the specialist skills, which are those which are necessary to fill the client gap and deliver the services to your clients. These skills can number in the hundreds or even thousands in many consultancies, especially IT service providers. In my previous organization, we had well over 1,000 specialist skills that we measured. Consultancy skills are the other angle. It's the other angle. They're the soft relational skills that overlay those specialist skills. Includes communication, teamwork, thinking, self-management skills, and so on. You'll need a database to track the skills. They're part of HRIS systems or human capital management systems, or there are standalone tools out there as well. And in fact, skills aren't just tracked at the employee level. You can also roll this information up to organizational level and track how the whole consultancy is improving, which is very useful for marketing and for RFPs. Now, by the way, if you haven't heard of or looked into SOPHIA, which is the skills framework for the information age, then I'd recommend you do look at it. It's well on its way to becoming a standard across many industries. And keep your eye out for the new IMCNZ competence framework. The IMCNZ is the Institute of Management Consultants New Zealand, of which I'm a member. And I'm pleased to say I was involved in creating that competence framework as well. So that should be released in the next few weeks, I believe. Let's look at the performance management process. So you'll need a performance management process to set goals for individuals. And when done well, it's a powerful means of aligning all the activities with the organization's own strategic goals, as well as improving the individual's performance. So on screen is a typical performance management process for consultancies. And a consultant will spend most of their time on client assignment, and it's here where most objectives are generally met. So if those objectives have been well designed, then client activity will match with the objective set, and the consultant can demonstrate capability and collect evidence easily. Difficulty arises, however, if it's not possible to meet the goals because the client work doesn't lend itself to allowing the consultant to meet those objectives. In that case, it's important not to penalize the consultant. Instead, maybe you set new objectives that can be met. Early interception of that potential issue, I think, is quite important. You should look to consider performance management really as an ongoing activity, not something that only happens once a year, for example. Next, I want to cover development models. This is something that I introduced in the last webinar in leadership, as it's a key responsibility of local leaders. So the career leader has a responsibility to get the best out of the consultants under their care. They therefore need to be educated in how to use different leadership models. And I refer to this as having a toolkit of models. Some of the most important and relevant to consultants and consultancies are on the screen right now. And I think, for example, situational leadership, and that posits the most successful leaders, those who adapt their leadership style to the abilities of the individual. Delivering feedback is important for consultancies. It helps the leader it helps them to deliver constructive criticism without damaging morale or relationships. Coaching, which develops an individual through insightful questions, and mentoring. Slightly different, but that's about how you pair people up for rapid knowledge transfer. And I think, as I said in the last webinar, all models need teaching and they need practice as well. Aspect 3 is interaction. And the objective of this aspect is to optimize the relationship between consultant and consultancy. Just take a drink, excuse me. Now, there's 3 aspects to this one. The first is empowerment. So let's talk about that one. And talent management has a role in creating the environment to allow consultants to take charge of their career and to influence their experience rather than just being a passenger in a company. Now, consultants are naturally independent-minded. They enjoy a degree of autonomy in their work, so empowering them tends to lead to more positive outcomes and higher engagement. So think about the following. About letting consultants have a say in their assignments, even if they don't have the final call. Developing a meaningful career development program along the lines of the non-linear or lattice frameworks we just talked about earlier. Letting them have a say in how some of their non-billable time is spent, and encouraging self-reliance, I think, is important, and that develops by developing the consultant's mindset to take advantage of all the things that you have on offer in the consultancy. Now, all of this empowerment needs to be balanced with company requirements. So it's possible to take empowerment too far, So look out for empowerment becoming individualism, which isn't productive for anybody. Next is expectations. And a consultancy employing a consultant will have formal expectations, and they're outlined in policies and procedures and so on. But there will also be informal, often undocumented, unspoken expectations that are driven from the values or the culture or just the way of working of the organization. And actually, much can be said from the consultant's point of view. They have their own expectations, which may not be verbalized. So what are the expectations of the consultancy towards the consultant? Well, as well as being able to deliver to the assignment brief, the consultancy will look for behaviors that help the business grow. They expect professionalism as well. In addition, they expect adaptability to flex with the ever-changing client environment, because it does. Also to build relationships and learn whilst they're on assignment. And what about the consultant's expectations for the consultancy, the other side of it? Well, a consultant will expect a career with learning opportunities, not just a job. They'll want a positive culture, probably want to focus on well-being. They'll expect to be fairly compensated for the work they do. And they may and probably do expect to see ethical and value-based behaviors from the organization. And as we said, they'll expect some level of empowerment in their career. And I think a key role of talent management is to make these expectations explicit so that there's a clear understanding between the two parties. Let's talk about engagement now. And if talent management is done well, then employees are more aligned with the company on what it wishes to achieve. So high staff engagement is important in its own right. I mean, everybody wants to work in a company where they feel valued and enjoy what they do. But of course, high engagement has a number of benefits to the company, including increased staff productivity, increased performance, reduced attrition. And there definitely seems to be a link with greater creativity and innovation through a willingness to give back. Now, I can't tell you the secret of engagement in consultancy, or more specifically in your consultancy. Go to LinkedIn, all the gurus are on there, they'll tell you it, I think. But the basics are simple to me. Treat people as humans, respect the need for autonomy, and give them something to do that they value and that really motivates them. Perhaps the best thing is to reflect on some questions that I can pose, such as, why do professionals choose to work in your firm, in your consultancy? What made them choose you? What behaviors do you model that would help build engagement? Do you do the right things? And are people able to express their motivations? And when they express their motivations, do people listen? I think by purposefully collecting and reflecting on those types of questions, you've probably got the building blocks for good engagement at scale. Let's look at reward as the fourth aspect. And the objective of reward management is to recognize the consultant's delivery, their achievement, and their standing within the company. I find it useful to split this into formal reward and discretionary. Now, the formal reward mechanism is typically through remuneration and benefits. And consultancies are notoriously opaque when it comes to salaries and incentives. I personally find that difficult to reconcile, and I'm in favor of as much transparency and equity as possible. Having said that, there are multiple factors that any consultancy leader has to juggle that affect tactical, strategic decisions regarding remuneration. And here are just three of my learnings from having run with remuneration processes for over 10 years. To avoid losing someone for salary reasons, staggered rises work quite well because they allow you to adjust rates and keep margins, as well as demonstrate a commitment to the individual. So, for example, we can give you an extra 10K this year, but we also commit to another 10K next year. We've found that very useful. I think, secondly, management team equity is very important. Roughly comparable pay amongst the management team is a risk reduction. The big risk, as I know for a fact, is when you bring in an unproven new rainmaker into the team. That costs not just a lot of big bucks for the individual, but also all the money it takes to bring the rest of the team up to the same level. And one key consideration is whether client feedback and performance appraisals are fed into the remuneration decisions, or whether you logically separate those things out. My advice is to bring all of that information in for fairness. It is difficult, it is complex, but whatever the answer, be clear and apply it consistently. There's many reasons to pay people what they're worth. From the employee's perspective, they feel valued, less likely to leave for reasons of pay. And from the employer's viewpoint, it reduces the time, the effort, and all the money that would be spent finding and training a replacement. And I think it's the ethical thing to do. The discretionary element is the second element in consultancies, is often related to there being an incentive for achieving usually an individual financial goal. But I think that has a number of problems. Firstly, consultancies rise on the tide. So it's possible to be a very average performer in a consultancy and do very well if the market is positive. And another problem is that if only financial goals are rewarded, this can lead to quite narrow behaviors with negative knock-on effects. You might have an overly transactional focus. You might put too much pressure on employees to meet your goals. There's certainly evidence that those type of goals can be gamed as well, so you can game the system. So another way in which to deliver discretionary reward, which is becoming more popular now, is to make it behavior-based. So that gives the benefit of encouraging alignment with values. It focuses individuals on long-term behavior, not short-term, like the financial goals. And it encourages collaboration and teamwork, generally. On screen, there we are, is something I have successfully used in the past. It's a set of example behaviors that consultancies might define to help consultants focus their behavior. And this puts the onus on the individual to make a case by providing evidence of the behaviors. So it's a very different way of looking at incentives that I think has a great deal of benefit. Now let's look at that fifth aspect, adjustment. So adjustment is about being able to identify when individual or organizational talent-related objectives are not being met and put in place actions to correct them. So it's got 4 elements: underperformance management, well-being, absenteeism, and attrition. Now, underperformance management is the activity of noting a shortfall in performance and then intervening to ensure an acceptable level of performance. The effects of underperformance in consultancies can be quite considerable, affecting on-time or quality deliveries, reducing the customer experience and damaging your reputation. And for consultancies who emphasize their specialist experience, that's quite concerning. So early intervention is therefore key. Now, on screen is an underperformance management framework I designed for consultancies. And the 4 stages move from incidental to corrective. So it provides an end-to-end model. This helps identify and describe the scale of underperformance, which is useful in the model. The early phases are designed to be non-confrontational and save face. And that helps a number of things. It helps give early feedback, but it helps managers get used to delivering ongoing feedback. And a process like this helps the organization and the managers collect information should they need to use it for more formal disciplinary processes. Very few people like giving feedback. Very few people like giving difficult feedback, especially. So I found that this kind of framework helps by giving career leaders straightforward, objective methods of dealing with all types of underperformance. Next, let's talk about well-being. And consultancy can be a pressure-filled job. There is high expectations from clients, short turnaround times between assignments, pressure to deliver, little learning time, and always the continual need to add value. It's important to be on the lookout for signs of pressure within your workforce. Once spotted, be prepared for early intervention. And here are 3 frameworks to help you do this. The first is a simple well-being index, and you can use this to self-assess or to collect information from consultancy teams. Most people on assignment you would hope would gather marks around the 1 or the 2 level, focused, manageable pressure. Once marks reach 3, you should keep a close watching brief on the situation, potentially look to resolve some pressure. But once marks reach 4 or 5, then you're looking at immediate intervention. So the well-being index is a very simple self-marking mechanism you can use. The second I call the rules of engagement framework. And this helps to ensure that the client is aligned with your consultant well-being philosophy. This means you acknowledge well-being everywhere. You put it in your values, you put it in your marketing material, you put it in the T's and C's for your contracts, and you cover it in account meetings, and you put it in account reports. You put it everywhere. And the final one is a on-site well-being framework. And here we have 5 stages of intervention, all the way up to exit from client. In some ways, you can think of this one as the underperformance management framework for clients. Interestingly, and I've used this one several times, when you put most clients on notice that there's even a potential well-being issue, which is a stage 2, and you're just reporting it to them, you're not asking them to do anything about it, they often respond in very positive ways. I think consultancy is a unique pressure proposition, and these 3 frameworks really help mitigate that. Now, let's talk about absenteeism, which is a pattern of frequent or disruptive occasions of being unavailable for work, usually at short notice, and it's particularly difficult for consultancies. What makes it so is clients have high expectations. Reliability is a necessary part of fulfilling those expectations. In addition, there is often a direct revenue loss to the consultancy. Add in the fact that clients often engage with consultancies for hard to find or hard to replace skills means that absenteeism affects both consultancy and client in a way that it might not do in a different organization type. If you haven't heard of the Bradford Index, it's a very useful formula for measuring not just how much absenteeism there is, but the effect of absenteeism. It's predicated on the basis that multiple short absences are more damaging than longer single absences, and is also a better indicator of the effects that absenteeism can have, rather than simply the number of missed days. The formula that is there on screen. The higher the number indicates a larger absentee problem, and applying this formula across your team helps you intercept the most impactful absentee situations rather than just number of occasions or number of days. So for any individual, understanding and addressing that root cause, of course, will be key for absenteeism. Consultancies can provide flexible working and bench time that may help reduce absenteeism, and that is a lever that can be pulled in consultancies. But ultimately, I think, you may need to keep individuals accountable using mechanisms such as the performance management framework. Now, attrition, which is the measure of the rate at which employees leave an organization, has some very good stats, as you would expect. And according to the same report, as I referenced earlier, the SPI 2023 report, attrition in the APAC region, including both voluntary and involuntary, stands at 13.7%. Strikes me as very low, I have to say. So I think that hides a huge range of actual figures. So there'll be some organizations with none, and there'll be certainly some with high double-digit figures. Attrition is always a key concern for consultancies, and it's because of the direct effect it has on delivery to clients and, of course, to revenue. It also takes effort to manage. And of course, organizations who are losing people have to run to stay still, especially if the market is tight. And in fact, the average days to recruit remains quite high at the moment. It's about 55 days. Add in another nearly 50 days for any consultant to become productive, then you can see how attrition can affect the overall effectiveness of the consultancy. So measuring your attrition rate and trends is an important KPI, but understanding the reasons, of course, are important. Again, according to SPR research, the top reason that employees leave are for a better opportunity at 36%, and second, for money at 24%. I think there's only so much you can do with these statistics, and people really, they often leave for multiple compound reasons, so it's not as straightforward as that. Talent retention, though, does have some of the highest correlations to financial success, and it's something that growing consultancies must have a defined focus on and thoughtful strategies to manage. And we move on to the final aspect, experience, the day-to-day. And the objective of this aspect is to provide the opportunities for the consultant to experience a wide range, or the wide range of opportunities that consultancy provides, to be able to get the most out of their time with the consultancy. And we'll start with an on-site experience. Consultants spend the majority of their time working on client assignment, well over 80% of their time living and breathing a different environment from that of the home consultancy. Talent management has a role to play in making consultants aware of and managing the on-site experience. And there's a few things there on screen that are included in this. So matching consultant career needs with relevant opportunities, dealing with mismatches. So when an individual isn't suitable for an assignment, which you may find in advance or actually during the assignment, teaching the individual how to integrate quickly and effectively into a client environment, ensuring they've got the right tools for the job, helping the consultant avoid what we call going native, relating to the client more than they relate to the consultancy, by stressing the fact that, the consultant is part of the client's team. It's not a client employee. And also explain all of those undocumented expectations that we covered earlier, professional working hours, accurate time recording, building knowledge about the client, and so on. Helping the consultant navigate the on-site experience, I think, is a critical role for the talent management function. But what about the other side of the coin, the consultancy experience? And because consultants spend so much time outside the consultancy home environment, the time that is spent interacting with the consultancy is that much more valuable. It ensures that the consultant and consultancy are aligned. So education here would include how to make the most of bench time or non-billable time, helping individuals understand the culture of the organization, how they can share information, and help the consultancy build knowledge, all useful stuff. But one thing that the talent function can really help with is to help the consultant build profile within the consultancy, build a high internal profile. So individuals should be encouraged to attend events, seek opportunities to contribute to the company through knowledge or intelligence gathering. And eventually maybe they'll lead those internal initiatives themselves. I just want to highlight another reference to the IMCNZ competence framework, because internal profile is regarded as a competence that a consultant should develop. That competence has 4 levels within the framework, and as you develop, you move higher up the scale from being a participant in the organization to someone who makes an impact, then someone who influences the organization, and finally somebody who leads. I think if you don't focus on consultancy experience as a leader, then the risk is that the consultant relates more to the client than the consultancy, which to me is an abdication of responsibility. Matrix management is an important part of larger scale consultancies. So it's not always evident who manages the consultant, because consultants often interact with or take direction from different senior figures within a consultancy. And we can look at this interaction from up to 5 perspectives, I think. So firstly, from a career perspective, where the management is concerned with the career path and development of the individual. From a delivery perspective, which ensures that the consultant delivers what was expected by the client. From an assignment or a resourcing perspective, which concerns all activities with regards to matching consultants and their appropriate client assignments. the technical or practice perspective, and that's usually around oversight of technical knowledge, delivery of quality solutions. And then finally, from an organizational perspective, which concerns the final reporting lines and managing large groups of employees. Once organizations scale, it's very difficult for any single individual manager to cover management from all of those above angles. Each one of those broad categories requires different touch points between the employee and the organization. And that's where matrix management begins to fill the gap. So with matrix management, clear messaging is important as to who the employee should go to for the variety of queries that they will have over their career and who would come to them. And one method that I've used in the past is to create an employee touchpoint matrix. Matrix management, I think, is almost inevitable in large consultancies, but I don't think it's that confusing if it's explained and documented clearly. And finally, I want to talk about mobility, and that is performing roles in different locations. So mobility is both a benefit and a downside of consultancy work, depending on the individual viewpoint. A multi-geography consultancy gains benefit from having mobile consultants by being able to move talent to where the work is, significantly increasing efficiency. And the difficulty arises where the consultancy and consultant have different mobility requirements. So having a mobility culture helps address this risk. It doesn't mean everyone has to be fully mobile. It means through the encouragement and setting of expectations, incentivizing, removing barriers, you allow those who wish to be mobile to do so, reducing the need for any enforcement. This means you'll have clear criteria for opportunities, a system to hold mobility data, and support mechanisms for when the employee lands in a new region. Larger organizations have dedicated mobility managers, and that recoups the costs of that manager by efficiency increases really quite quickly. I'd recommend also that smaller companies do get outside expertise, especially when it comes to relocation between countries. Unlike most of the elements in today's presentation, mobility requires focus. So to recap, what do you need to consider in a talent management framework? Firstly, how careers are managed using a career path, supporting promotion processes, supplementing that with a lattice or a portfolio view of progression, having career leaders, and finally using the career mechanisms to future-proof the organization. Next, how are you going to develop your consultants? By creating an L&D strategy, developing key skills and competencies, using a performance management process, and having a toolkit of relevant development models. Next, structures that define and support the interaction of individual consultant and consultancy over the three themes we have there of empowerment, expectations, and engagement. Reward, which can be split into formal mechanisms and discretionary. Next, systems for preventing things from going off track or for when things aren't going to plan. So that's frameworks for underperformance, well-being, absenteeism, and attrition. And finally, frameworks for managing key elements of the consultant experience. Includes on-site at a client, consultancy experience, the matrix management elements, and mobility. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. To leave you with one final thought before we go to the Q&A session. I'm very much a believer that I'm very much an and person rather than an or person. In that case, I don't believe there's a consultancy strategy should be either just client-focused or people-focused. I think that's a false dichotomy. The emphasis may change from day to day, but over the long run, it is possible to be client-centered, but still put your people first. And with that, I'd like to open up the session for any comments or questions. Thank you very much.